You've been holding on for far too long, carrying the weight of connections that no longer serve your calling, entertaining conversations that drain your spirit, surrounding yourself with people who clap for your victories but secretly hope you fall just so they can feel taller standing next to your brokenness. I know it feels like loyalty, like love, like dutig, but baby, it's not. It's bondage. There comes a time when God starts stirring something inside of you, a holy agitation. You can't sleep. You can't eat the same. What used to satisfy you now makes you sick. And you keep trying to go back to what's familiar because it's comfortable. But God never called you to comfort. He called you to purpose. And purpose requires separation. You keep praying for elevation, but won't let go of the very people anchoring you to your old self. You want transformation, but you're still trying to dread weight into your next. And let me tell you, your next can't begin until you close the door on your last. You are not obligated to stay where God no longer resides. Just because they were a part of your story doesn't mean they deserve a seat in your destiny. You've been shrinking to make them feel comfortable, dimming your light so theirs could shine, laughing at jokes that hurt your heart, sitting at tables where your name is only safe when you're not in the room. And still you stayed, hoping that if you just love a little harder, prove yourself a little more, they'd see your worth. But baby, stop auditioning for a role God never told you to play. There's a version of you that you haven't met yet, and she's waiting on the other side of your obedience. You keep crying over what you're losing, but God is rejoicing over what you're making room for. The subtraction is strategic. The rejection was protection. The confusion, oh, that was confirmation. You were never meant to fit where you were tolerated. You were born to thrive where you were celebrated. I know you're scared. I know it feels lonely. You're thinking, but if I walk away, who will I have? Let me remind you, sometimes God isolates you before he elevates you, not to punish you, but to prepare you. He's cutting off access to what's familiar so he can introduce you to what's divine. And when you stop chasing people, you'll start encountering purpose. You keep trying to fix what's broken, but what if God allowed it to break so you could be free? What if that falling out wasn't a failure, but a divine release? What if their silence was God's loudest? Let them go. You see, we confuse being needed with being valued, but need without respect is manipulation. And God is trying to pull you out of that cycles so you can breathe again. You are not a doormat. You are not a rehab center. You are not their lifeline. And it's not your responsibility to fix people who refuse to heal. Let them go, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with love, with grace, with peace. You are not walking away to abandon them. You're walking away to answer God. There's an anointing on your life that can't afford to be contaminated by confusion. You've got oil, sis, real oil. And not everybody can handle the weight of that oil. Some people are just not assigned to your next season, and that's okay. Maturity looks like blessing people as they exit. Maturity looks like releasing people without resenting them. Maturity looks like walking away when staying would cost you your peace. You can't hear God clearly in chaos. And some of the people you keep around are noise dressed up as company. You've got too many voices in your ear and not enough truth in your spirit. But when you get quiet, when you pull away, when you finally say, God, I surrender, that's when clarity comes. That's when healing begins. Stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop trying to prove your growth to those who benefit from your brokenness. You're not crazy. You're not being dramatic. You're evolving. And evolution will always offend the stagnant. You're not who you used to be. And thank God for that. But if they can't handle your growth, they don't deserve your presence. God is calling you to higher, but you're still tethered to people who are comfortable in the valley. Don't let guilt keep you grounded. You were made to soar. You were made for glory. You were made for more. So yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, you'll grieve. Yes, it'll feel like a loss, but obedience will always produce fruit that feelings can't. This is your moment, your release, your shift. The next level is not a place, it's a posture. And you can't climb holding on to what God told you to let go of. You need open hands, open heart, open mind. You can't be full of destiny and drama at the same time. Make a choice, make it now. You're not walking away because you hate them. You're walking away because you love what God is doing in you more. You love your peace more. You love your future more. And maybe, just maybe, by walking away, you give them permission to find their healing too. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can dog is leave. God never said following him would be easy, but he did promise it would be worth it. So dry your tears, lift your head, straighten your crown, and take the first step, not because it's comfortable, not because you have all the answers, but because your spirit is finally louder than your fear. And when you walk with boldness, walk with grace, walk with power, walk like the woman God already knows you are. Because freedom is on the other side of obedience, healing is on the other side of goodbye, and purpose is waiting for you to make room. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is let go of what feels familiar, even when it's no longer feeding your soul. But the truth is, growth is rarely comfortable. You can't evolve and stay the same. You can't stretch and stay safe. And that's why letting go is not only necessary, it's holy, it's sacred. It's the sign that you're making room for something greater than what you've been holding on to. We talk about favor, we talk about overflow, we talk about destiny, but we don't often talk about the pruning that comes before the promise. We don't talk about the divine disruptions that force us to re-examine the people we've allowed to walk too closely with us. When God begins to stir something in your spirit, there will be people in your life who simply won't be able to go with you. It's not because they're evil or bad. It's because they were only meant to walk with you for a season, and their season is up. But if you don't release them, you run the risk of missing what God is trying to bring you into. You keep asking God for a new season while you're still trying to drag old attachments into it. And the truth is, your next level has a weight limit. Some people are too heavy for where you're going. We think we're being loyal by staying connected. We confuse endurance with entrapment. But there's a difference between commitment and compromise. If your growth is constantly costing your peace, your clarity, your identity, then it's not loyalty, it's limitation. And you were not created to live limited. You were created to live free, bold, full of the fire of God and the clarity of purpose. And that can't happen when you're clinging to dead branches. God is a God of order, and he does not operate in confusion. If every time you leave certain conversations you feel smaller, if every time you're around certain people you feel clouded, unsure, unstable, that is not from God, that is a sign. And the more spiritually sensitive you become, the more you'll realize that every connection is not divine. Some are distractions dressed as loyalty. Some are assignments from the enemy to keep you occupied, just to know that you miss your breakthrough. And I know it's painful, especially when you've invested time, energy, prayers, and love into those connections. But time spent doesn't make something sacred. Just because they were there for you once doesn't mean they're meant to stay forever. God uses people for seasons, for purposes, for shaping. And sometimes their role in your life has been fulfilled. Holding on past that point turns a blessing into a burden. Growth requires grief. Letting go will hurt. There will be tears, questions, even moments of regret. But the pain of obedience is always better than the pain of delay. God can heal a broken heart, but he won't bless disobedience. If he's nudging you, if he's giving you that unrest, if the peace is gone and the joy is dim, then that's his way of saying, daughter, it's time to move. And when God says move, you can't afford to stay still. It's time to recognize that elevation and isolation often go hand in hand. There are seasons where God will separate you so he can shape you. Not because he wants to punish you, but because he needs your attention. He needs your focus. He needs you undistracted, unhindered, unbound by the expectations of people who don't even know who you really are in the spirit. And he can't give you the clarity you've been crying for while you're still entertaining confusion. Sometimes the reason your prayers aren't being answered is because your environment is canceling out your faith. You're sowing seeds into soil that God already told you to leave. You're pouring into people who have no intention of pouring back, and yet you wonder why you're spiritually dry. The soil matters, the company matters. And walking away is not quitting. It's planting yourself in healthier ground. God is trying to do a new thing in you, and it can't be built on old patterns, old relationships, old mindsets. That's why letting go is not rejection. It's preparation. He's preparing you for divine connections, for purpose partnerships, for rooms that require your full anointing to be activated. But you can't access that next dimension if you're still spending your energy manning drama from the last one. You've got too much oil to stay stuck. Too much destiny to stay distracted. And every moment you delay your release is a moment you delay your breakthrough. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start loving yourself enough to honor what God is doing in you. It means you trust him enough to believe that what's ahead is greater than what you're leaving behind. And no, you won't always understand why certain people had to exit your life. But clarity often comes after obedience, not before. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to say yes. You just have to be willing to unclench your fists, open your hands, and let God replace what you were never meant to hold in the first place. There is a weight you've been carrying that was never yours to hold, a responsibility you took on, not because God assigned it to you, but because your heart is so full of compassion, you started mistaking your love for their healing as your purpose. Somewhere along the way, you started believing the lie that it's your job to fix them, that if you could just love them enough, stay long enough, pray hard enough, they'd change, they'd see, they'd finally become who you know they could be. But hear me, loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself to save them. You are not the savior. That position is already taken. You can pour and still find them thirsty, not because your love isn't real, but because they've chosen not to drink. You can cover them in prayer, show up every time, sacrifice your peace, your sleep, your boundaries, and still nothing. Because healing is not something you can force on anyone. Healing is a choice. And if they haven't made that choice, you're just exhausting your soul in a battle they're not even fighting. You are not called to bleed for people who won't even bandage their own wounds. You are not called to sit in emotional cycles that drain you, hoping that one day your patience will be enough to change them. And let's be real, deep down, you've known for a while. That feeling you keep ignoring, that restlessness in your spirit, that voice telling you it's time to stop rescuing. That's God gently trying to free you from a burden that was never yours. You're not wrong for wanting them to win. You're not weak for loving them deeply. But strength doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looks like releasing. Sometimes love says, I believe in you, but I can't lose myself trying to carry you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and let God be God. Because as long as you keep standing in the way, they don't have to face their truth. As long as you keep fixing what they break, they never have to learn to build. You've become a shield between them and the lessons that would actually grow them. And I know you mean well. I know your heart is pure. But good intentions can still lead you into bondage when you forget where your responsibility ends and God's begins. Your assignment is not to be their lifeline. You were never designed to be their anchor. That's why you're tired all the time. That's why you've been feeling empty, like you're giving everything but getting nothing in return. You've mistaken sacrifice for sainthood, but God doesn't need you to save them. He needs you to trust him with them. Sometimes we disguise codependency as compassion. We call it loyalty when really it's fear. Fear that if we walk away, they'll fall apart. Fear that we'll be seen as selfish. Fear that if we stop showing up, no one else will. But fear is not faith. And God has not given you a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. That sound mind includes the wisdom to know when enough is enough. When your presence is enabling more than it's helping. When your love is actually cushioning consequences that are meant to produce change. You've got to stop playing God in someone else's story. Because while you're over here breaking yourself into pieces to hold them together, your own purpose is being neglected. Your own soul is silently crying out, wondering when you'll choose you. And let me tell you, choosing you is not selfish. It's stewardship, your heart time, your peace, your calling, they all matter. You cannot continue to pour out and expect not to run dry. Even Jesus withdrew. Even Jesus walked away from crowds. Even Jesus said, no, you're not doing them any favors by staying stuck. In fact, your exit might be the very thing that pushes them toward real transformation. Sometimes love lets go. Sometimes love steps aside so that the person has to face themselves and finally decide whether they're going to grow or stay broken. And if they don't, that's not your failure. That's their choice. Release yourself from the outcome. Release yourself from the guilt. You were never meant to be the answer. They were always meant to find it in God. So maybe the most powerful thing you can do for them is to stop trying to save them. Maybe the miracle isn't in your persistence, but in your surrender. In trusting that the same God who's working you is more than capable of working in them. And even if it takes years, even if you never see the fruit of it, know that your release was still obedience. And obedience always honors God. It's time to take your hands off the situation. Time to stop forcing healing where there is no readiness. Time to trust that walking away is not quitting, it's realigning. Realigning with the truth that your value is not tied to how much you can endure for someone else. Your worth is not proven by how long you can suffer in silence. You are worthy even when you choose peace. You are powerful even when you choose to walk away. And you are still full of love even when that love says, I can't do this anymore. There's a sacred moment that happens when you stop begging people to stay, stop trying to make broken places feel like home, and finally decide to make room for what God is trying to do in you. That moment of surrender, when your heart whispers enough, is not weakness, it's alignment. It's the beginning of something holy. Because walking away is not about abandonment. It's about positioning. It's about removing yourself from what's familiar but draining so God can pour into you what's divine and sustaining. You cannot carry the weight of your calling and still entertain the comfort of your past. Something has to go. Something has to break. You can't keep asking God for purpose while making peace with dysfunction. You can't pray for clarity and then surround yourself with noise. At some point, you have to choose. You have to decide that your future matters more than their opinions, that your healing matters more than their presence, that your obedience to God outweighs your desire to be accepted by people who never understood your anointing in the first place. It's not that you're better than them. It's that God is doing something different in you. And different requires distance. When God is trying to bring you into a new season, he will often start with subtraction. It's his way of clearing space, clearing your atmosphere, your spirit, your mind, so that when he begins to pour, there is nothing in the way to block what's coming. And we don't always recognize it for what it is because it comes wrapped in loss, in silence, in unanswered texts, and doors that used to swing open suddenly being locked. But what you see as rejection is often God's redirection. What feels like abandonment is often protection. You're not losing, you're being aligned. You can't receive new relationships while holding on to expired ones. You can't embrace what's ahead while still grieving what never was. At some point, you have to trust that God's hands are better than yours, that if he allowed it to leave, it wasn't tied to your destiny. Because here's the truth, destiny doesn't walk away from you. Real purpose partners don't have to be chased. When it's from God, it fits, it flows, it bears fruit, and it multiplies peace, not confusion. So yes, walking away makes room. It clears the clutter of people who only loved you when you were convenient. It silences the noise of those who wanted access to you, but not accountability with you. It dismantles the illusions you built around people who were never capable of loving you the way you deserved. And in that emptiness, in that sacred space of solitude, something new begins to grow. God begins to whisper. He begins to heal. He begins to reveal the things you couldn't hear over the noise of their presence. And I know it's scary. I know it feels like isolation, like loneliness, like losing your lifeline. But what if the silence isn't a void? What if it's preparation? What if this space you're in now, this in between, is God breaking every idol, stripping every attachment, and preparing you to recognize his voice again? Because truthfully, some of us have gotten so tangled up in people that we started treating them like our source, like our security, like our identity. But anything that replaces God in your heart is an idol, and idols must fall before purpose can rise. Letting go makes room for discernment. You start to see things more clearly. You begin to recognize the patterns that kept you stuck, the mindsets that kept you small, the emotional debts you kept trying to pay with your worth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because that's when healing begins. That's when transformation happens, because healing doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in clarity. And clarity comes when you finally walk away from what God never asked you to stay connected to. And yes, there will be grief. Grief over what you hoped they would become. Grief over the version of the relationship you were holding on to in your mind. But grief is not a sign you've made the wrong decision. Grief is part of the process of releasing. And after grief comes freedom. Freedom to rediscover who you are without the weight of their expectations. Freedom to show up fully with editing your light to fit in with people who preferred you dim. When you walk away in obedience, you make room for divine appointments. You make room for purpose, aligned people who won't flinch at your truth, who won't compete with your growth, who can hold space for your healing and still see your strength. People who challenge you to rise, not shrink. People who don't need you to be broken to feel whole. That kind of alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you say yes to the release. So stop grieving what God has already moved. Stop revisiting closed doors. I stopped rehearsing what could have been. The longer you sit in the ruins of what fell apart, the longer you delay what's waiting to be built. Destiny is not behind you, it's ahead. It's waiting in the space you create when you finally say, God, have your way. I trust you more than I trust my history. And when you make room like that, heaven responds every time. So now you see, it was never just about walking away from people. It was about walking into clarity, into healing, to obedience. Every person you released, every door you closed, every silent goodbye was a step closer to the version of you that's been waiting on the other side of surrender. God has been calling you higher, and you can't go higher carrying the weight of people who were never assigned to your future. The pruning hurt, yes. The silence was loud, yes. But it made room. It taught you to trust God more than you trusted your own plans. Reminded you that your peace is not negotiable, your purpose is not optional, and your obedience is not up for debate. So let this be your confirmation. You are not walking away from love, from grace, or from hope. You are walking away from distraction, from delay, from the deception that told you had to settle for less. Let them go. Release the weight. Make room for what's next. Because what's coming is greater than what you're leaving behind.